I'm about to show you how to switch out the battery that's inside your DualShock 4 controller. The first thing you need to do is locate a replacement battery. I bought this package off Amazon for 14 bucks, and it contains 2 batteries, a screwdriver, and a prying tool. These batteries have 2 types of connectors to ensure it's compatible with all the variations of the DualShock 4 that's out there. I'll be straight with you. When you buy these unofficial batteries off Amazon, you are likely getting ones that aren't as high quality as the originals. You'll see some reviews that say they have a shorter lifespan. At least the kit I bought comes with 2 of them, so if one runs out, I'll just put in the other one. If you want the original batteries, you could buy a broken DualShock 4 off eBay and remove the battery from that one, assuming that battery wasn't the reason the controller wasn't working to begin with. Just remember what I said before, Sony has different variations for the connectors, so you want to make sure you get one that matches the connector that's inside yours. Moving on, to get inside, you'll need to separate the 2 shells that make up the outside. If you see any gunk in the gap between the 2 halves, scrape it out. It kind of acts like a glue, so removing it will make things easier. Remove these screws with a Phillips 00 bit or something very close to one. If you have a screw that doesn't want to unscrew, soak it with 1 drop of water, then dry it out. Also tap on the screw with the driver. All that should help loosen it up. Before you pry the 2 halves apart, hear me out. There is a ribbon cable connecting both halves. If you yank those 2 halves apart with too much motion, that cable will snap. You don't want that to happen. Also note, the 2 halves are held together by tabs. For some people, those tabs are tight, and one may break when you separate. If that happens, do not worry, just get rid of the broken pieces. You don't want them rattling around inside. There's enough extra tabs to keep everything together, plus you have the screws. Yet, another thing to be mindful of is that some of you will have a piece of plastic that goes in between these buttons here. If you have that, you have to kind of feed the buttons through as you separate, or else you'll snap off one of the buttons. If one does snap off, it's no problem, just set it aside for now. At the end of this video, I'll show how to put everything back together, including those buttons. So with all that in mind, go ahead with the separation. Some of you may be able to do it with just your hands, but most of you will need something to pry with. I recommend something plastic instead of something metal. Next, disconnect this ribbon by pulling it out of the connector. If this button came out, put it aside for now. You'll see the battery sitting there. The next step is to separate the wires that lead to it, which is done by unplugging this connector. Once again, hear me out before you do it. It's made up of 2 plastic pieces connected together very tightly, and you just need to separate them. If you pull them apart without being careful, you could snap the bottom connector off the board, and that'll cause major problems for you. To prevent this from happening, pull the top connector with your finger or with pliers or with both, but at the same time have 1 finger or fingernail on the bottom connector that's on the board. This will keep it from separating from the board. So go ahead and separate them. With the cord out, you can now remove the battery. For some of you, it's rather loose. For others, it's held on by a little bit of adhesive. Next, locate the new battery and make sure its connector is the right size for the board connector. In my case, I need to choose the one that fits. Push the connector in. Remount the battery, tuck in the cords off to the side. Now I'll tell you how to put everything back together. Some of you may have had a trigger button that came off. There are 2 kinds of triggers. Some of them have tails and some of them do not. If yours has a tail, then you're in luck. It just pops right back into place. If you don't have the tail, you likely have a spring that either fell off or is still on the button. And putting it back together is a little bit tricky, but I'll guide you through it. Tilt the button like this. If that spring did come off and it's the R2 button, place the spring on the left spindle. If it's L2, place it on the right spindle. And make sure it's not positioned this way. This way is backward. There's a little spot under that spindle. One leg of the spring needs to go into that slot. It doesn't snap into the slot, it just kind of lays there loosely. Hold the button like this and keep it like that as you bring the controller up to it and snap it into place. If this button came out, place it back into position like this. Now you need to reconnect this ribbon, which will be hard if you have big hands. If you do have big hands, maybe use a set of pliers to reconnect it. You also need to make sure you don't plug that ribbon in backward. If you have a perpendicular connector like this, the silver traces on the cable need to face toward the battery. If your connector is angled like this, those traces need to face away from the battery. Just know if you get everything back together and the controller does not light up, it's likely because you reversed that connector cable. Snap the two halves back together. Put these screws back in, and you are done. Remember to charge the battery. Let me know if you found this video useful. Have a great day, everybody.